All right, so we're talking about the priesthood and why only men are called to be the priest, or a baptized man, vir is Latin for like masculine man, biological man. And the only reason the Catechism gives is that Jesus called men, and those men called men. And that's not a very satisfying answer. But when the time the Catechism is being written, this is a very controversial subject. And so I'm actually surprised at how simple that this answer is. There are other reasons. The next question is, well, why did Jesus only talk to men? Why did he? I'm sorry, I take that back. He didn't only talk to men. Why did Jesus only call men to be his apostles? Why did he only turn to his apostles and say, "Do this in remembrance of me"? Now, one contribution of the class was that men were the leaders of the society at that time, and that was definitely true. Like the leadership of the Jewish religion was masculine. The leadership of the pagan Roman Empire was masculine. Nevertheless, I want to point out to you one important thing. Jesus broke those barriers numerous times. When he talked to the Samaritan woman at the well, a Jewish man was not to talk to a Samaritan woman. Jesus is able to break, or does break, those social expectations for women. He touches and talks to a convicted prostitute. You don't do that. Or let a woman like that touch him, as one of them, wipes his feet. Jesus was not afraid to acknowledge the equality and dignity of women in his ministry. But he never turned to them and said, be my apostle, and he talked to his apostles, who were 12 men, in a different way. Okay. Now, the next question is, well, why? And I'm going to give you two more theological answers. Okay. Number one is the original couple, Adam and Eve. Eve is formed out of the rib. Let me do a quick Bible overview right here. Out of the rib of Christ comes out blood and water. The water baptizes us, and we are the church. And the church is the bride. Nice. The church is the bride. And that means Jesus is the groom. We've been over this relationship twice already this year. But that means that when Jesus dies and says, take this is my body that is given for you. Drink this cup will be poured out for the forgiveness of sins. Do this remembering of me. When he does that, he is acting as the groom. I am dying for my bride, the church. I am sacrificing for my beloved. That is the action of a groom to the bride. And gentlemen, when you get married one day, that's the message that you're going to send to your bride, and that is, I'm ready to die for you. And that's true love, as Jesus said in our bell ringer today, John 15:13, no greater love hath this than to lay down one's life for a friend. So, the point here is this, that Jesus acts as a groom. When he tells the apostles to do this memory, he's telling them to act as in his person, which is as the bridegroom of the church, which means the grooms are men, and that therefore men are priests. And only a man should be a priest, because only men can be the image of a groom there at the altar. A woman in her body cannot portray that, cannot convey that. Reason number three is, so number two is that Jesus is groom. Number three is that Jesus came on behalf of the Father, sent by the Father to do the work of the Father. Jesus says, you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So when we look at a priest, we don't call him, son. We call him Father. You are an image of the Father. You are the Father's gift to the church to give us graces and blessings. And so that would be a third reason why only men can be priests, because only men are fathers. And that a father bestows gifts and blessings, and that's what a priest does. He blesses you. That's a fatherly role when it comes, that is across the Bible. And so to image God the Father, men are ordained priests. So, for those of you that perhaps, and there might be a handful of you in the room that still don't get this, that it's a little bit sexist that the Catholic Church is run by a bunch of men. Couple things. One is that Pope Francis has been doing a lot to increase the role and impact of women in the church. There's more and more women on Vatican boards to actually make decisions and to give advice to the Pope. Women are now instituted as lectors and Eucharistic ministers officially for the first time in church history as of the past year. So Pope Francis is trying to increase the visibility and the role of women in the church, and you could validly have that opinion if you do. Because of that, I actually wrote a 75-page master's thesis on the role of women in the church. Perhaps I'll share it with you if you want any light reading this weekend. But men and women are equal, for sure, no question. Okay. I just thought you had something you wanted to say. Men and women are equal, no doubt about it, but that doesn't mean that we're the same. We're the same in many ways, but we're different in many ways. And when the church says men can function as grooms and fathers, that's because they're men, and that impacts the role they have in the church. Women, brides, mothers, have another impact in the church. And I think other than, of course, the Blessed Virgin Mary, you have Mother Teresa, who had a huge impact on the church in our day in a way that I think it took a woman to have the impact that she did. And she was more influential, actually, than almost any priest of her day and age. So that's all I have to say about that. Any thoughts or questions? Okay. It's not something the world's ever going to agree with or see nowadays, but it's, the church doesn't change with the times when her reasons are deep and biblical. All right, so just one slide. Moving down the totem pole of the hierarchy, I'm just going to talk about the role of deacons for one slide. Deacons are ordained by a bishop, and the bishop ordains them through the laying on of hands. And those two facts that I just said are bolded here. The bishop ordains a deacon through the laying on of hands or the imposition of hands. Laying on of hands is your vocab term from a long time ago. Thus signifying the deacon's special attachment to the bishop and the tax of his diaconia. Diaconia is a Greek word for service. It's a Greek word for service. And so when somebody is a deacon, well, you're really, if their name is Deacon John, you're basically calling them Servant John. And what they do is they serve the priest. They kind of help him do his job. They can't do everything. On the next bullet point, I'm going to highlight what a deacon can do, what he cannot do. But they are the support for the priests, as you can see at the Mass pictured here and in the life of the church. When did homilies start? Homilies? Ooh, those go all the way back. I mean, even in Jewish liturgy, we see in the Bible, Jesus goes to read the scroll in the Jewish synagogue. After he reads a passage, he gives his take on it. So that goes before Christianity, before Christ. Just this is the word of God, and let me teach you about it. But yeah, you're right. Deacons can give a homily. It doesn't happen too often in Lafayette, but it can happen. The Sacrament of Holy Orders marks these deacons with an imprint of character. I'm not going to teach you or expect you to know this top part because you're going to learn more about it next year in sacraments. But nevertheless, like I've already said, the deacon is supposed to be like Christ, who was a servant of all. Once again, you saw this term with the priesthood, but this is what it's about. When only men are ordained priests, it's not because men are better than women. It's because men are called to serve in this particular way, and women are called to serve in other ways. Among other tasks, it is the task of deacons to assist the bishop and priest in the celebration of the divine mysteries. Above all, and then what I have underlined here is the top most common tasks that deacons can and do for their church parish or their diocese. They help at the Eucharist. They cannot say Mass. You cannot have a deacon say Mass. You can have a deacon lift up the chalice and, say a few lines of the Mass, but he cannot do a Mass all on his own. He can marry two people, if you will. You might have a relative that's a deacon, an uncle or a grandpa, and you go get married. Your deacon, uncle or grandpa, maybe dad, can lead the vows. I take you to be my lawfully wedded wife or husband, to have and to hold this day forward in good times and in bad. A deacon can guide you in those vows and then bless your marriage. So that's one way. Now, most people get married by a priest, but it's possible for a deacon to do it. The proclamation of the gospel. So that's where the deacon's going to go to the pulpit and declare a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. And when he says that, he's able to proclaim the gospel. That is something that only a priest or a deacon can do. And then the preaching of the homily, which I already referenced a little bit, that is a deacon task. Once again, it's up to the priest. Where I'm from in Rochester, New York, deacons and priests tend to flip every weekend. It's pretty common. Down here, I've been living in Lafayette for over 8 years. No, it's about 8 years now. And I've seen a deacon do a homily maybe once or twice. Not common at all. It's St. Martin de Tours. Interesting. I don't know that. Yeah. Anybody else go to a parish where you see your deacon giving a homily? Dusong. Not Peter and Paul and Scott? I thought y'all went there. Okay, you mix up. But in Dusong. Okay. Oh. And by say Mass, you mean say the gospel. Yeah. Read the and give the homily. I was gonna get to Deacon Butch because the last thing I've underlined here, Deacon Butch says, and I'm friends with Father McIntyre. He tells me Deacon Butch does about 3 funerals a week because he's well known. Everybody in Brobridge knows him. He knows everybody, so he can speak to the families. He can pray. Of course, he's a deacon. He can lead the prayers, but he also he can crack jokes. So lighten the atmosphere is sometimes a good thing to do at a funeral. So Deacon Butch, that's his gift to Saint Bernard. Right, and that's a great gift that Deacon Butch is to Brobridge, but many deacons across this area and across the world can do. And they can be married. They have to get married before they become a deacon. But these are the top most common. A lot of other deacons will teach catechesis classes and RCIA, but this is their role in serving the priest, and it can really make the priest available to do more things and advance the parish. So they can be pretty essential in the life of a parish. Oh, they can baptize too. That's not in the list. They can do baptisms. The truth is, anybody can baptize theologically. You and I could baptize somebody, but deacons can regularly baptize. You and I would only baptize if there was an emergency. Somebody was dying and they hadn't received baptism yet. But a deacon could do it any given Sunday. All right. So that's your content for chapter 4. We're going to get to the saint lesson right now. You're going to need to know this, but it's, it's more of a story, less of a, bullet points. Okay. So, Father Verbis Lafleur is the topic of lesson 4, and reminder this Thursday at 6 o'clock at St. Leo, you can go listen to a talk about his life in more detail. That'll get you some bonus points if you need it for this class for the third quarter. Now, that's Thursday. You're going to have to email me the selfie and the what you learned fact of that talk before like Saturday. So you have about 48 hours to send that to me in my email inbox. Father Verbis Lafleur, born in Ville Platte, Louisiana. Y'all know where that is? Mm-hmm. Ville Platte, home of Chico State Park. I'm sure there's other things, but no. Sacred Heart High School, I know that. St. Landry, but it's home to this future saint, Father Verbis Lafleur. Yeah, well, we did Nunco, and he's up for canonization. Yeah, Charlene Richard. She will probably be next chapter. Next chapter, I'll teach you about Charlene Richard. She's probably the most well-known of the three. But we did Nunco. This is number 2, Father Verbis. You're going to get Charlene Richard next chapter.
Wait, he's a saint, or is he getting...
He has the cause open and being sent to Rome right now for the Pope to judge.
So he has like his miracles?
Complicated. I'm going to teach you about that process next. He, for reasons I'm about to teach you, is grounds that he may not need any miracles to become canonized as a saint because he died in his service. So more on that to come. I know, ruin the ending for you. Born in Ville Platte, January 24th, 1912. So it means today he'd be 110 years old if he were still alive. 4th of 8 children, big Catholic family. But as I'm about to teach you, it was not a beautiful, picture-perfect Catholic family like you might expect. There, you see that blue star? That's Ville Platte, north of us. Pretty central Louisiana, once you think about it. Now, write down what you need to. I'm going to tell you his life story. But his father's name was Valentine, however you want to pronounce it, Valentine. And his father was abusive, physically, verbally, and therefore emotionally abusive, to mom, to kids. I think alcohol was a part of the problem. It would drain the family finances and inhibit him from working effectively. His family remained in poverty for a while, and he would just abandon them to try to restart his life. I think he would move towards New Orleans, but he would, after being an abusive father and not providing for his family, he would just up and leave. 8 kids. 8 kids. And his mom, left alone to raise 8 kids, cannot do that financially. And so she has to move in with family. Her family's in Opelousas.
So you said it inhibited him from working. Is that the dad or
The dad, perhaps because of his alcoholism or bad temper, was not able to provide, hold a job or be successful at a job. So Verbis and his family is going to move a little bit closer to Lafayette in moving to Opelousas, where he practices his faith in immense fashion, talking about his desire to be a priest at the age of 7. Verbis would walk a mile and a half every day to go to daily mass out of his own free will, serving at daily mass every day of the week. Now, here's the thing. One difference about the church today in 2022 and the church in, we'll say, 1922 is that around this time, if you wanted to be a priest, but your parents were divorced, you were basically told no. Divorce is a lot more common today. 50% of marriages end in divorce. Back in the day, in the 1920s, that's not the case. I don't know what the rate was. If I had to guess, it would be around 10 to 20%. But in the 1950s, divorce becomes a lot easier legally, and it's justified morally more so in the 60s. And divorce has just ramped up in America over the past 60 years. That being said, in the 20s, or this would be in the 1920s, your parents are divorced, you were kind of labeled as, I guess from a bad family, not a good family. They're going to have issues, and they probably shouldn't be a priest. Nowadays, when 50% of kids, actually maybe more than that, kids' parents are not married, whether it be divorced or they never got married, people don't think about that as much. Anyway, it's not an issue. It's not an inhibiting factor to being a priest. But at the time of Verbis Lafleur, that was a real issue. Luckily, I think the priest in Opelousas saw into Verbis and saw the goodness of his character and made a plea and a case for him to enter seminary, and he was able to at the age of 15. You see a blue star over here in Covington, Louisiana. The only problem with this Louisiana map is it doesn't have Lake Pontchartrain on it. So there's Lake Pontchartrain, right? And then on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, you have Covington. In Covington or outside of Covington, you have St. Ben's or St. Joseph Seminary at the Benedictine Monastery outside of Covington, Louisiana. He enters at the age of 15. His mom goes with him, makes the trek probably all the way across 190. So this would have been in 1927. And she says, now, y'all, this is a big moment in life. I'll get a little bit personal with you right now. I've only seen my dad, who's a big, tough guy, like probably a lot of your dads. I've only seen my dad cry twice in my life. Once was when his mom died. He cried briefly. Second time I saw my dad cry is when he dropped me off at college, which was about 5 hours away from my home. And he got really choked up and, for the first time, I'm not under his wing anymore, right? And y'all will have this experience. Some of you might get I wasn't emotional about it at the time. I was excited, like you're going to be, to go to college one day. But it stuck with me, the fact that my dad cried dropping me off. That being said, his mom, single mom, is dropping him off at 15. I got dropped off when I was 18. This is even younger. And she's got this golden boy. Well, when his mom dropped him off, she did something a little bit strange, but it's going to come back later in this story. So bear with me. She wanted something from the seminary to remember Verbis with. And so what she did was she kind of had Verbis dig up a small pine tree on the seminary grounds. She brought it home. She planted the pine tree in her backyard. And she would pray near or perhaps looking at this pine tree every day for her son Verbis and his vocation to be a priest. In seminary, he would play baseball, tennis, basketball, and football, basically. Those are all the sports I played growing up. So that's cool. And while making good grades, he was ordained in 1938 in New Orleans. So he'd be about 26 years old at this point. And so there's my next star. It's hard to see now that I put the Lake Pontchartrain there, but you know where New Orleans is. That's where, and to this day, most of the priests from Lafayette, they go to philosophy at St. Ben's, and then they'll jump down to New Orleans to study theology. Sometimes they do 4 years at each, and then they get ordained a priest. A lot of studying, a lot of school. So he's ordained.
How big is St. Ben's?
Good question. It's growing right now, actually. I was there this past summer. I went to a conference there, and I asked some of the professors how big it was. They're starting to get seminarians from all over the southern part, from California, even from Florida. Yeah. You know how Turling sometimes with like fundraisers or fun days, we do like make your own dodgeball team, make your own volleyball team, and there could be 2 teams, it could be 20 teams. But now St. Ben's would not be 800 strong like Turling's, but it would be small league style. But yeah, baseball you're gonna need But back in the day, you didn't have video games. Everybody played baseball.
How big's the campus?
The campus is sizable. I can't. It's big. There's a lot of people that just live on that campus. It's bigger than Turling's, campus wise. Right, it's a college. They've got multiple buildings, workout area. They got different soccer fields and whatnot. I feel like academic wise, they've got more space than Turling's. But yeah, so it's comparable. But yeah, in-house, you call these in college intramural sports, which are a lot of fun most of the time. Sometimes they get too competitive. All right, so he's ordained in New Orleans. And then he's going to get his first assignment down here in Abbeville. And the tradition is, this is the newly ordained Father Verbis Lafleur. The tradition is that the day the bishop ordains the priest, he's going to hand him a letter and say, this is where you're going. I don't know if that happened for Verbis Lafleur, but it probably did. And he's being sent to Abbeville, which is in the Diocese of Lafayette, just on the other end of it. And so he's going to go there to St. Mary Magdalene Church, which is a beautiful church if you haven't been there before. Passing through Abbeville, don't hesitate to stop for Mass because it is one of the most beautiful churches, I believe, in the entire Diocese of Lafayette.
How does a priest get assigned to a school?
You mean like Father Brian Taylor is assigned here? That can be very complicated. It's obvious to see how Father Brian Taylor, pastor of St. Genevieve Church, is in charge of St. Genevieve School. But the bishop looks at all the priests that send their kids to Turling. So you got St. Bernard, you got St. Peter and Paul, you got St. Peter's Carencrow, and of course you got St. Genevieve, St. Leo's, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton. And the bishop typically, he can break this rule. He's going to look at those 6, 7, 8 priests, and he's going to say which of these has the time, the energy, and the gifts to help Turlings do what it's got to do. And he's going to tap one. If they say no, then he's got to tap somebody else, kind of. But, well, usually they go with it. So it's kind of who's available. Good story about, you're going to start to see, obviously you've seen a good holy kid so far in his life, despite having an abusive parent. But what you're going to see is more and more crazy sacrifice from Verbis Lafleur, and he is now a priest during the Great Depression. And the boys of his parish do not have the money or the resources to get baseball equipment. So he's going to sell his watch to a pawn shop and kind of swap it basically for baseball equipment. He'd be involved in the Boy Scouts and many other activities. He was a funny guy. He was a lot of fun to be with, from what I read. I never obviously met him, but athlete, supporter, and just joyful man to be with. So very sacrificial. St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church in Abbeville. Beautiful place. All right. So that is him becoming a priest. That's his childhood. After 3 years in Abbeville, everything's going to change on the outside. The World War II is starting to brew, and everyone saw the World War coming. And he went to Bishop Jean Mard, first Bishop of Lafleur, and said, "Let me go be a military chaplain." The bishop said, "No, I want you here." A few months later, World War II is looking all the more real, and on a second attempt, he is given permission to go be an army chaplain. To be an army chaplain, to be a priest in the military, you have to be a soldier. So he's going to go to boot camp. He's going to become a soldier in New Mexico. He's going to go through the training process. Now, the truth is, if you're a chaplain, they're not going to put you behind a machine gun, and they're not going to tell you to drive the boat or the submarine or fly an airplane. But you gotta blend into the military life. So that's what he's doing. I want to tell you a story though. Before he goes to New Mexico, he's going to go meet his father, Valentin. Yeah. And he's going to say, "Look at me, how I turned out in priest." No, he doesn't. He doesn't guilt trip his dad. He offers his dad forgiveness. He says, "Dad, I forgive you." I don't know what he exactly said. We don't have those words. But he went out of his way to offer his dad forgiveness and got in touch with a priest friend that lived near his dad, who I think was still in the New Orleans area, and made sure that his priest friend would look after him so that his father would get confession and anointing the sick before he died. He did his best to make sure that his abusive dad would go to heaven. Yeah, that's him before he goes off to boot camp. So,
did the priest know he was abusive?
probably he would at least know that this is not a great relationship or a distant relationship. He to what degree we don't know. But forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. This is something that, once again, I hope you talk about more as a junior. It's in the junior curriculum. The need to forgive. It's not an option. It's not even just for the holy people. We all need to learn to do this. And if you get more stories about forgiveness like this, you might learn to forgive that bully on campus, that jerk from middle school, or maybe your own parents, or maybe your own relatives, your own siblings. But, pray hard that you can do so. So that's the first bullet point. On the bottom, I mentioned here, from New Mexico in boot camp, Father Lafleur is going to go to a military base in the Philippines. And they're basically camped out waiting to go on alert for World War II. But the USA is not committed to fighting in the war yet. While he's sitting in base, he creates a baseball team in the Philippines for the soldiers. Once again, serving the men, giving them what they would need to be, happy and remain joyful, all up until Pearl Harbor. Now, he's in the Philippines. He's not in Hawaii near Pearl Harbor. But after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, I believe December 6, 41, I think that's the Pearl Harbor date. The Japanese would fly the next day to the Philippine Islands and bomb the U.S. military bases in the Philippines where Verbis was. He survived that bombing. He would have to flee the base with a lot of soldiers, and he'd be running from the Japanese for a couple months. Okay? No, I'm just waiting for people to finish their notes, and I'll continue the story on the next slide. 2 slides left. It gets even more remarkable, though. It's not just, oh yeah, he dies in the war. That alone is in a remarkable life, remarkable story. But I'm not sure if a story just like that gets him canonized a saint. It gets even better. Gets more remarkable. Father Lafleur and his company, his fellow soldiers, would bounce around islands to avoid being captured. At one point, he was offered to be given a special evacuation to Australia. So, and this is sometimes how chaplains are treated, very respectfully. Hey, Father, you didn't sign up to fight in this war. You don't have to be here. His military leader, commander at hand, said, I can get you to Australia. You and a couple other chaplains, you and a couple other guys, we can get you out of here. And you don't have to be running from the Japanese for the rest of the war, at best. And he said, I shall stay here. My place is with the men. Not abandoning the cause.
Is this World War II?
Yeah, this is the start of World War II, for the Americans at least. The war has been happening in Europe, but we didn't get involved until the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Y'all will learn about this in American history next year. So I was going to say something else. So yeah, he has the opportunity to leave. Now, he wrote a letter to his mom around this time, and he said, Mom, the world is so crazy out here. When I get back to Louisiana, I'm never going to leave again. So this is not just some naive guy that, wants to see war and whatnot. No. He missed Louisiana. He missed his family. And he was likely going to die, but he stays. Like, you get the image of Jesus Christ, who just came and loved us unto death. American troops would surrender to the Japanese, basically. Hands up, come out of the bushes. Comes Verbis Lafleur and others. And that makes him a POW in what you will probably learn next year, in a very torturous Japanese prison camp. Here the soldiers experience physical torture. One example of torture that I can give you was they made them jog 25 miles in one day without any food. Yeah, you couldn't walk. Yeah, no food.
You ever watch the movie Unbroken?
Yes, that's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. Yep. Japanese prison camp, World War II. Dude had to hold a beam above his head for a crazy amount of time. Yeah. That gives you a glimpse into, that was him. This is this Catholic priest. And similar, Japanese just tortured. Many of their enemies, I'd say, is throughout history. Serious torture. Many Catholic missionaries. They were actually hung from their feet, dropped down on a rope into the ground, and the ground was poop and urine, and they would be drowned in poop and pee until they denied Jesus Christ was Lord. That was the torture that the Japanese put American missionaries through in the 17th century. And that is the PG version. I won't say anymore. Father Lafleur is there, but he's not there, and he's not going to give in. Okay, PG-13 version. Father Lafleur would construct a chapel at the POW camp. He'd actually build a room. He actually built a place for the men to come and pray. I guess the Japanese let him do this much. And his witness and his leading in prayers and his education and his inspiration that he gave to the American POWs, prisoner of war, if you don't know what that means, had such an impact that it is believed that he converted about 200 of them to Catholicism. That's a remarkable number. It takes a remarkable amount of grace and strength from God for him to be able to do that. I got one more slide. One more slide to describe his death. Yes, he died. Now, he would be a prisoner of war for 2 to 3 years before his death, but I have to describe his death to you. Yes. I guess till the end of the war. American involvement in the war, I want to say 3-4 years.
So he was about to get out from.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the date.
Time to go and like liberate all these
Yeah, the process. But all right, last slide. All right, September 7th, 1944. Prisoners, including Father Lafleur, were forced onto a ship. This is a picture of the actual ship. It's called the Shinyao Maru, Japanese ship, of course, Japanese name. It was part of a fleet that was referred to as hell ships. You got prisoners packed in there like cattle, barely able to breathe. Father Lafleur led the prisoners in a rosary. Okay, so this is what happens. Why did the Japanese put them on a ship? Why? Because the Japanese can tell the Americans in the air, hey, don't bomb us. I got to finish this. Are you? Tennis to AP.
Tennis pictures and JV match have been moved to Acadiana Park.
Torpedo hits the ship.
Attention juniors, if you have not paid the $50 ACT fee, you will receive an email reminder. Anyone who needs to pay the fee can bring it tomorrow and give it to your test administrator. Attention teachers, if your room is being used for testing, please put your desks or tables in rows. Do not leave your room with desks in circles. A list of rooms being used is posted on the resource page under special events. And I also need Andrew Saunier to report to the front office. Thank you.
Real quick. So the idea is the Japanese, hey, we have your prisoners here. You can't bomb us. But for whatever reason, the American torpedo hits the ship. It's sinking. I would hold that perhaps because of the prayers, a random Japanese officer opens a hatch to let out the Americans. Father Lafleur doesn't jump out. He helps people out of the boat, getting people through the hatch. He does not make it out himself. He died saving 82 men. His family was notified of this November 2nd. His mom responds with, I know he died. Look out my window. My pine tree died about that time. You're dismissed. Have a good day.